A powerful gale struck Providence, Colorado at 3:17 p.m. on February 9, 1884. Its arrival was abrupt, without any prior indication. This wasn't a mere breeze, it was a tangible assault, a dense barrier of wind and ice that assailed the mining settlement from the north. The air temperature, initially a crisp yet tolerable 10 degrees, plunged by 40 degrees in under 20 minutes. The sky, which had been a calm gray just moments earlier, transformed into a turbulent horizontal maelstrom of white. Deep within the mountain, Silas Garrett perceived only a faint, high-pitched whistling sound as the wind located a minute flaw in the seal of his sturdy wooden entrance. He glanced at the thermometer affixed to his inner stone wall. It consistently displayed a temperature of 52 degrees. He placed a single, well-dried log into the compact cast-iron stove, not primarily for warmth, but for the pleasant illumination it would offer. His chestnut mare, Copper, adjusted her stance in the adjacent stable, which was likewise hewn directly from the natural rock. Her gentle snort conveyed complete satisfaction. While the outside world seemed to be in turmoil, inside it was simply an ordinary Tuesday. Silas understood his preparations were complete. His only remaining task was to await the outcome. 2 years prior, during the spring of 1882, Silas Garrett had been regarded with considerable interest. This curiosity soon turned to pity and eventually outright mockery. Having arrived in the West as an orphan at the age of 16, he dedicated the subsequent 15 years not to prospecting for gold, but to understanding the very ground beneath his feet. He was employed in the silver mines, initially as a surveyor's assistant rather than a blaster, and later as a timberman reinforcing tunnels. Eventually, he advanced to the position of junior engineer. Through these experiences, he came to comprehend the inherent characteristics of rock formations. He understood granite's resilience, shale's unpredictability, and the principles of thermal mass. He observed that even during the harshest winter conditions, the temperature 50 feet within a mine shaft remained remarkably consistent, fluctuating by only a few degrees. This was consistently close to its annual average of 54 degrees. He witnessed wooden supports as thick as a man's waist, bending and breaking under the mountain's enormous pressure. Yet the rock itself stood firm, seemingly everlasting. Once he had accumulated sufficient funds, $300, a modest fortune acquired through diligent saving, he chose not to purchase a town lot or a parcel of level pasture. Instead, he visited the land office and engaged with Mayor Hutchins. A man whose conventional nature surpassed even his ambition, Silas unrolled a map on the counter, his finger indicating a plot of land situated 2 miles north of the town, which was universally deemed valueless. This particular area was a steep granite bluff, a 200-foot-high rock face oriented southward, providing a view over a creek. It was considered unsuitable for construction or cultivation. Mayor Hutchins looked over the top of his glasses. "That's the former Miller claim, young man. It's nothing but solid rock, just a cliff and some sparse scrub pine. Constructing a cabin on a 60-degree incline is impossible." Silas gave a nod, his composed manner frequently misinterpreted as a lack of quickness. "My intention isn't to build on it, Mayor," he clarified, "but rather within it." From his pocket, Silas produced a folded sheet of paper. This document contained a meticulous drawing, illustrating a cross-section of the bluff. He had meticulously designed a primary chamber, measuring 18 feet in width and 24 feet in depth, featuring a vaulted ceiling 10 feet high. Adjacent to this, a smaller compartment served as a stable for his horse. A slender stovepipe was intended to trace a natural rock crevice leading to the exterior. He had already computed the total weight of stone needing extraction, the necessary implements, and the projected timeline. This demonstrated the meticulous planning of an engineer, not the delusion of a lunatic. Mayor Hutchins gazed intently at the blueprint, a gradual, patronizing grin of amusement forming on his features. "My boy," he remarked, tapping Silas's shoulder, "the year is 1882. We possess sawmills now. We construct proper wooden frame dwellings, homes fit for a civilized society. Humanity abandoned cave dwellings a millennium ago. What on earth could compel you to reside in an underground excavation? Silas offered a calm, technical explanation, which merely served to distance him further from the pragmatic individuals at the land office. He discussed the concept of geothermal insulation. The mountain, he clarified, functions as a thermal reservoir during the summer months, absorbing solar heat and then gradually dissipates it throughout the winter. A residence carved within the rock would maintain a remarkably stable temperature, demanding significantly less firewood compared to a traditional house. Its south-facing entry point would harness the low winter sun, supplying both passive solar warmth and natural illumination. The immense bulk of the rock itself would render the structure invulnerable to strong winds, heavy snowfall, and fire hazards. It is not a cave, he politely clarified. It is a thermally controlled, structurally robust habitation that leverages the inherent characteristics of the surrounding terrain. The Ute civilization constructed cliffside residences based on these identical principles for hundreds of years. Far from being primitive, they demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. The mayor simply gestured his disapproval. He then sold Silas the 40-acre plot for a mere trifle, $10, and the tale had circulated throughout Providence before the evening meal. The reserved, reclusive orphan, known as Silas, was widely believed to have finally gone insane. His intention was to inhabit a rock formation. The derision truly commenced on the day Silas reached his property, accompanied by a wagon laden with excavation equipment and his reliable mare, Copper. Martin Fletcher, a rancher whose expansive two-story residence was the grandest in the county, came to observe. Fletcher had invested more than $4,000 in his own dwelling, which stood as a testament to his achievements. The notion of someone opting to reside in a subterranean cavity felt like a direct challenge to his belief in advancement. He observed Silas employing a star drill and a heavy hammer to initiate the first bore for blasting. "What's wrong, Garrett?" Fletcher jeered, his tone laced with contempt. "Grown weary of dwelling above ground like the rest of us? Opted to live among the prairie dogs instead?" The moniker endured. At the local general store, patrons would inquire of Thomas Brennan, the proprietor, if he had encountered the badger that day. Children, echoing their parents' mockery, would shout the name whenever he visited town for provisions. The undertaking was initially dubbed Garrett's Burrow, and subsequently, more concisely, the Folly. Rebecca Walsh, the local schoolmistress and a woman who valued intellectual progress, incorporated Silas's situation into her lessons as a cautionary example. She lectured on humanity's progression from cave dwellings to simple huts, culminating in the elegant wooden houses they now inhabited. Mr. Garrett, she clarified for her students, symbolizes a decline, a retreat into an unenlightened past. We ought to feel sympathy for him rather than seeking to imitate his choices. Dr. Harrison Webb, a man of science, even found it preposterous. He confronted Silas outside the Mercantile Building one afternoon. "Silas," he stated, "a person's lungs require fresh, circulating air. A damp cavern fosters tuberculosis and rheumatism. You are essentially inviting sickness." Silas attempted to clarify that his plans incorporated a ventilation system, featuring a fresh air inlet near the floor and the stovepipe expelling stagnant air. "It will not be humid, doctor," Silas asserted. "The granite is impermeable. It will be considerably drier than a log cabin with deteriorating chinking." The physician merely sighed, then departed, shaking his head. The community had already formed its opinion. Undertaking such an unnecessarily intricate and peculiar task became colloquially termed pulling a Garrett. The labor was harsh, systematic, and isolated. Silas Garrett toiled for 2 years, his daily routine marked by the clang of steel against stone. He would bore a sequence of holes, then meticulously measure and position small, exact dynamite charges, sufficient only to crack the rock, not to demolish it entirely. The detonations resembled faint, suppressed coughs rather than powerful roars. Following this came the arduous task of removing the debris. Employing a wheelbarrow and a sledgehammer, he fragmented larger sections into more manageable sizes. Copper, equipped with a custom harness, would then haul stone-laden sleds from the expanding subterranean space. These were then deposited close to the stream bed, where Silas meticulously arranged them to construct a retaining barrier. Occasionally, on Sundays, the local residents would journey to the construction area, viewing it as a source of community amusement. They observed him, bare-chested under the summer sun, his muscles defined and slender, his face consistently streaked with stone particles. They witnessed an individual performing what they considered to be futile, irrational work. He never responded to their taunts. He simply continued his labor. His approach was painstaking. He maintained a logbook documenting his advancements. June 12, 1882. The primary chamber was extended by 2 feet, reaching a current total depth of 8 feet. 4 charges were utilized. Copper transported approximately 3 tons of debris. He reinforced the entry point with a substantial wooden framework, using 12-inch pine beams acquired through trade with a lumberjack, thereby fashioning a 20-foot-long, 8-foot-wide passage that functioned as an airlock. He understood this area served as the vital transitional space separating the external environment from his consistent internal atmosphere. Within, the walls were not left unfinished. For 4 months, he meticulously smoothed them using a hammer and chisel, not for visual appeal, but because even surfaces would inhibit moisture accumulation and distribute light more uniformly. He sculpted recesses for shelving, a sleeping platform, and a work surface. Copper's stable represented an exemplary feat of horse-specific design, featuring a sloped floor to facilitate drainage and a feeding trough sculpted directly from the natural rock. The cumulative expense for his supplies, encompassing the $22 cast iron stove, the explosives, the drill components, and the lumber, amounted to $187. Martin Fletcher's expenditure for the glass in his sitting room windows exceeded that sum. By autumn of 1883, the residence was finished. He constructed a robust, insulated wooden door and installed it within the timber framework. He then brought in his limited belongings, a simple bed, a table, 2 chairs, his geology and engineering texts, and his father's antique rifle.
Người dân địa phương cá cược trong quán rượu về sức chịu đựng của anh ta. Hầu hết tin rằng anh ta sẽ tìm chỗ trọ ở nhà trọ trước trận tuyết rơi lớn đầu tiên. Trong một mùa đông nọ, mọi người đều đồng ý rằng thời điểm này sẽ chấm dứt sự điên rồ của anh ta. Tuy nhiên, mùa đông đầu tiên đó lại ôn hòa, và Silas đã sống tốt. Nhu cầu củi đốt của anh ta cực kỳ ít ỏi. Anh ta chỉ dùng chưa đến 1 bó củi trong suốt cả mùa. Trong khi hàng xóm của anh ta, trong những ngôi nhà cách nhiệt kém, đã dùng 5 hoặc 6 bó. Vào mùa hè năm 83, khi nhiệt độ vượt quá 90 độ, dân làng phải chịu đựng cái nóng gay gắt. Thế nhưng, bên trong căn hầm của Garrett, thủy ngân luôn duy trì dưới 65 độ. Anh ta vẫn mát mẻ, thoải mái và hài lòng. Những thành tựu khiêm tốn của anh ta ở một khía cạnh nào đó lại gây khó chịu cho cộng đồng hơn so với sự điên rồ mà họ gán cho anh ta. Dân làng không còn đến chế giễu anh ta nữa. Khả năng khiêm tốn của anh ta đã làm mất đi sự thú vị của việc đó. Cứ để họ quan sát. Silas nói với Copper khi chăm sóc cô ấy trong chuồng ngựa mát mẻ xây bằng đá. Tương lai sẽ cho thấy sự thật. Vào ngày 8 tháng 2 năm 1884, các dấu hiệu bắt đầu xuất hiện. Silas, với sự hiểu biết sâu sắc về tự nhiên, nhận ra chúng ngay lập tức. Không khí trở nên đặc quánh, thấm đẫm một mùi kim loại lạ thường. Các loài chim, kể cả những loài chim sẻ và chim dẻ cùi mùa đông kiên cường, đều biến mất hoàn toàn. Anh ta quan sát thấy một đàn nai sừng tấm đang xuống từ vùng đất cao với một sự vội vã hoảng loạn chưa từng thấy. Cuối ngày hôm đó, áp kế trên tường của anh ta giảm mạnh. Anh ta nhẹ nhàng gõ vào nó, nhưng kim vẫn đứng yên. Đây không phải là lỗi cơ học. Anh ta dành ngày hôm sau để hoàn tất những sắp xếp cuối cùng. Anh ta chuẩn bị thêm 1 tuần cỏ khô cho Copper. Anh ta sắp xếp toàn bộ số củi dùng cho mùa đông, một đống nhỏ bé so với tiêu chuẩn của làng, ngay bên trong lối vào. Anh ta kiểm tra khe cửa và lấp đầy những khe hở nhỏ còn lại bằng vải bạt tẩm dầu. Anh ta lấy nước sạch từ suối, đổ đầy 4 thùng lớn, biết rằng việc tiếp cận sẽ sớm bị cắt đứt. Anh ta cân nhắc đến khu định cư để đưa ra cảnh báo. Nhưng anh ta hiểu phản ứng có thể xảy ra. Kẻ ẩn dật điên rồ dự báo thảm họa sẽ bị chế giễu và đuổi khỏi quán rượu. Những lời cảnh báo của anh ta sẽ chỉ trở thành một yếu tố khác trong trò đùa cợt của họ. Bị coi là điên rồ là một cái giá nhỏ để sinh tồn, anh ta suy tư. Tuy nhiên, có lẽ đó là một cái giá quá đắt khi cố gắng cứu những người coi bạn là điên. Anh ta vẫn ở yên tại chỗ. Trận bão tuyết khi ập đến mang một sự dữ dội huyền thoại. Cư dân sau này sẽ gọi nó là cái chết trắng. Tuyết không rơi xuống, thay vào đó, nó di chuyển theo chiều ngang. Một trận mưa hạt băng chói lóa, xói mòn được đẩy bởi những cơn gió đạt 70 dặm một giờ. Trong vòng vài phút, tầm nhìn giảm xuống chỉ còn một sải tay rồi biến mất hoàn toàn. Tiếng ồn là một sự ầm ĩ không ngừng, chói tai, giống như vô số đoàn tàu chở hàng cùng lúc lao qua. Cơn bão này không chỉ bao phủ trái đất, nó đã xóa sổ nó. Trong 24 giờ đầu tiên ở Providence, điều kiện rất khó khăn. Đến ngày thứ 3, nó đã leo thang thành một thảm họa toàn diện. Những ngôi nhà khung gỗ trang nhã mà thị trấn rất coi trọng, hóa ra chỉ là những túp lều được trang trí khi đối mặt với cường độ của cơn bão. Cơn gió mạnh đẩy tuyết qua mọi kẽ nứt và khe hở. Không khí lạnh giá biểu hiện như một lực hữu hình, hút đi hơi ấm từ chính các cấu trúc. Các gia đình quây quần sát bên lò sưởi, liên tục tiếp nhiên liệu cho chúng, nhưng hơi ấm tan biến nhanh chóng ngay khi được tạo ra.
Martin Fletcher's large, multi-windowed residence was frigid. He and his family consumed a month's supply of firewood in just 2 days, struggling to prevent hypothermia. By the 4th day, the original roof gave way. Thomas Brennan, who owned the local store, heard the structural timbers groan before they yielded with a thunderous crack. A 12-foot deep mass of snow from his roof cascaded into his living area, dousing the flames and engulfing his furnishings. He and his family narrowly made it to a rear chamber. Chimney flues became obstructed by compacted snow and ice, causing smoke to fill homes. Entrances were either frozen solid or submerged beneath snowdrifts extending to the roofline. The settlement of Providence was progressively disintegrating, structure by structure. Yet, within Garrett's subterranean refuge, existence persisted in tranquil, protected ease. The central chamber's temperature consistently remained above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even without the stove lit. The blizzard's fierce roar was a faint, muffled drone, signifying an external world that had ceased to affect him. He perused his geological texts by the glow of a lantern, cared for his copper, and consumed his modest provisions. His daily wood usage was limited to 2 logs, one each morning for coffee and one each evening for warming his stew. He felt secure and warm, and as ever, solitary. The first visitor appeared on the 5th day's evening. It wasn't a gentle tap, but rather a frenzied, urgent hammering. Silas unlatched the substantial door, letting in a gust of frigid air, revealing a form so encrusted with ice it was almost unrecognizable as human. It was Dr. Harrison Webb, who then collapsed into the entrance, struggling for breath. His countenance was a visage of petrified dread. "My wife," he rasped, his voice strained. "She has pneumonia, and our home, the fire is nearly gone. We've resorted to burning the furniture. We'll freeze before dawn, I beg you." Silas acted without delay, assisting the doctor indoors. He settled him beside the stove and offered a mug of hot coffee, then donned his warmest overcoat. He secured a length of rope and accompanied the doctor back into the raging storm. The 200-yard trek to the doctor's residence, typically a 2-minute walk, consumed an entire hour. They partially supported the doctor's disoriented wife on their return to the burrow, a haven of warmth and tranquility amidst the tumultuous blizzard. They were the initial arrivals, but certainly not the final ones, as news appeared to travel on the very gusts of wind. The following morning brought Thomas Brennan and his family, their faces marked by frostbite, their eyes wide with astonishment at the serene warmth within the stone structure. They had spotted the faint plume of smoke from Silas's chimney. It was the sole chimney in the whole vicinity not obstructed by snow, and they had staggered towards it as their ultimate recourse. By the 7th day, a continuous stream of people arrived, family after family, one by one. Those very individuals who had ridiculed him, labeling him a recluse and an idiot, now struggled through the snowstorm to the entrance of his perceived foolishness. They reached his door, half frozen and utterly subdued. Their arrogance had been stripped away by the harsh, unfeeling gale. Silas extended a welcome to everyone, sharing his provisions, water, and the comfort of his shelter, without ever referencing their previous mockery. There was no opportunity for self-satisfaction. Only the imperative of survival remained. The primary chamber was transformed into a temporary medical ward and sleeping area. 27 individuals, along with a horse, found refuge within the mountain's protective confines. Mayor Hutchins was the final person to arrive, accompanied by Martin Fletcher, who was almost completely frozen. Fletcher's splendid $4,000 ranch home suffered a catastrophic roof collapse, its structure crushed effortlessly by the heavy snow, as if it were a child's plaything. Having narrowly avoided disaster, Hutchins, with a pallid complexion and his expensive attire in tatters, surveyed the room. He observed his fellow townspeople, secure, warm, and living. His gaze then shifted to Silas. The mayor's voice wavered as he admitted, "We dismissed your endeavor as foolishness. Yet this very folly has preserved the lives of 27 individuals." Silas responded with a simple nod and offered him a blanket. "Such details are irrelevant now. Your safety is paramount," he stated. "That is what truly counts." The tempest persisted for an additional 2 days, culminating in a relentless 9-day onslaught. Upon its eventual cessation, the ensuing quiet was as startling as the preceding clamor. The survivors exited Garrett's subterranean dwelling to find a world utterly altered, a panorama of strange white formations. Providence had been completely ravaged. 14 individuals perished, and scores more suffered from severe frostbite. Over half of the town's 80 buildings were irreparably damaged. 7 days later, once the deceased were interred and initial recovery efforts commenced, Mayor Hutchins convened a community gathering within the skeletal remains of the destroyed church. He requested Silas Garrett to present himself before the gathered survivors. "I must offer you an apology," Hutchins declared, his voice firm and unwavering, resonating through the chilly atmosphere. "Indeed, we all do. I labeled you uncivilized for choosing to reside within a rock," he continued. "I made an error. We constructed our residences with great pride, only for the wind to destroy them. Yours, however, were built with foresight and intelligence. And it provided us refuge. I once considered you misguided, yet you alone constructed for the reality of the world, not for our idealized version. You were correct. Heaven help me, you were absolutely correct." Martin Fletcher rose to his feet. "My ranch is lost, but I possess funds in a Denver bank. I will finance the construction of additional shelters for anyone requiring one." He then faced Silas. "If you would instruct us." Silas Garrett, once known as the Orphan, the Badger, the Fool, stood before the assembly and merely uttered, "Certainly." In the subsequent year, the terrain surrounding Providence underwent a transformation. Leveraging Silas's methods and Fletcher's financial support, the community commenced excavating new residences directly into the rock. These structures served not merely as emergency shelters, but evolved into permanent residences. Dr. Webb meticulously recorded Silas's techniques, dispatching comprehensive correspondence to engineers at the Colorado School of Mines. The fundamental concepts of geothermal building, knowledge possessed by ancient civilizations for centuries, were brought back to light. By the winter season of 1886, 11 households in Providence resided in dwellings hewn from solid rock. The expression, "pulling a Garrett," persisted, but its meaning had shifted to denote an action executed with exceptional foresight and intellect. Silas Garrett remained in his subterranean home throughout his remaining years. He never took a spouse, yet he was never solitary again. He rose to become the most esteemed elder in the town, a reserved individual whose counsel was sought regarding all aspects of construction and endurance. He passed away tranquilly in his sleep in 1918, at 69 years old. His funeral was attended by the entirety of the town and residents from 3 surrounding counties. His final resting place was on the cliff face above his dwelling, marked by an unadorned stone overlooking the valley. Presently, Garrett's Burrow is recognized as a preserved historical landmark. The settlement of Providence not only endured, but ultimately flourished, with its distinctive stone architecture becoming a significant attraction. Engineers and architects continued to visit, seeking to understand the elegant simplicity of his architectural design. A bronze plaque is affixed to the robust timber framework at the dwelling's entrance, a structure he erected over a century ago. It was installed in 1920 by the grateful townspeople whose lives he preserved. The inscription reads, "Silas Garrett, initially dismissed as folly, proved his wisdom when societal order collapsed. The mountain remained steadfast." He imparted the understanding that the most secure refuge is not constructed in opposition to nature, but rather integrated within it, specifically within this rock. He saved 27 individuals and secured the future prosperity of our community. His loyal horse, Copper, stood beside him, representing the very first life preserved by this sanctuary. The rock formation endures, as is its inherent characteristic. Winter gales still sweep across the elevated plains, and snowfall continues, yet the fundamental lesson persists. It is inscribed not only into the mountain's granite, but also deeply embedded in the collective memory of the inhabitants. Being prepared should not be misconstrued as paranoia. Rather, it signifies the utmost reverence for a world that is more ancient, more powerful, and considerably less lenient than human arrogance.